5:06 on News Talk 105.9 WMAL. Sorry about that. I was just reading with a lot of interest, actually, a lot of the various articles out there on our next guest, and looking forward to speaking to Cheryl Chumley, opinion editor and host of the Bold and the Blunt podcast for the Washington Times, author of the book Lockdown, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. Cheryl, I believe that you and I could probably do at least an hour just on the book, Lockdown, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. Cheryl, welcome on in to the Vince Coglianese Show on WMAL. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, Dan, for having me.
So let's talk about general news of the day. Of course, you know, Donald Trump indicted in Georgia in this election interference case. And I got to tell you, Cheryl, I have not been able to find one attorney that I respect that actually thinks that this is a legit indictment. As a matter of fact, we just spoke with, in the last hour, Hans von Spakovsky, and he, along with Jonathan Turley, Alan Dershowitz, and others, are just saying that this is clearly designed to get a very quick guilty plea, won't hold up over appeal, but it'll get a guilty plea before the election. And so I guess, I don't know, give me your general thoughts on all this.
All great legal minds that you just listed, right? And they all probably weighed in with unbiased opinion, legal opinion, which is what we need in these perilous times right now, because this is just political daggers being thrown Donald Trump's way. And what's curious to me about this latest indictment, which I haven't had time to read the full 98 pages yet, but I have started to, and I've been reading headlines about it, it just seems like it's a kitchen sink being thrown Trump's way, along with his 18 others, naming anybody and everybody connected to Trump who might be able to be flipped, because I think this is the ultimate end game here, to try and get some dirt by getting the other people who are indicted in this in rooms by themselves and just parsing their words until they get something that they can bring to the next media cycle to keep the next narrative against Donald Trump going.
Well, and you're right about those great legal minds, because Jonathan Turley is a Democrat and Alan Dershowitz is as well. So they're certainly not Donald Trump fans by any stretch of the imagination. They are, however, fans of the Constitution, as am I, and of course, as are you. And so, you know, part of, I think, what's going on is you have two different ways to look at this. So if you are a talk show host like me, or a podcaster like you, and a journalist like you, you know, we look at this and we look at it from a couple of different angles. Number one, I think that this does and will continue to galvanize the right. And you have a lot of people, and I'm going to raise my hand on this one, who you've been frustrated with Donald Trump in the past for whatever reasons, ill-advised comments or tweets or social media posts or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, you realize that he is being absolutely bullied. And so it is galvanizing the support, I would say, behind Donald Trump. But on the other side of the coin, you know, there is a very strong possibility that he's going to be found guilty on this, and then it'll dissolve in appeal. But how do you think this is going to impact? I think we all know what's going to happen with the primary, but what do you think is going to happen in the general election with all of this?
Well, as for the primary, you're right. All we have to do is look at the polls, and we see the more indictments thrown his way. My gosh, his poll numbers keep rising. For crying out loud, the recent poll I was just reading was that Trump was at 40% in one poll of Republican voters. Chris Christie was beating Ron DeSantis, which is remarkable. So this isn't hurting Trump politically with his supporters. Where we have to look, of course, like any election, is the independents. And I just have an optimistic feeling about the American public right now that once again the Democrats have done what they always do and gone too far left. They've gone too far to the lunatic fringe, and even independents are awakening to the fact that this is highly political, and they're asking themselves questions like you just pointed out about the Constitution. Is this the America we want going forward? Because if this is how the government can treat Donald Trump, think how the government can treat me or you or average Joe or Jane. And I do believe when we head toward the election, the general election that you just asked about, that's the question that's going to be on that also crucial independent-minded voting bloc.
You know, we talk about, and you watch these things far closer than I do, but, you know, you look at the independent voters, and I consider myself very much conservative. I am a free agent, as I like to say, in the Republican primary. I thought it was interesting because I saw that same headline where you now see Chris Christie in some areas doing better than Ron DeSantis. You know, my question is, what happened to Ron DeSantis? Like, I remember when, before he announced that he was running, I was like all in. I mean, he's saying the right things. He's doing the right things. He's the governor of Florida. He's, you know, JAG, military, the whole thing. And it's just like, it's like he wilted. I don't know what else to say about it. What happened to Ron DeSantis?
I think he brought on a lot of anger from the Trump supporting base and conservatives when, and I don't remember exactly the words he said, but when he made that comment where he seemed to throw Trump under the bus.
Yes.
And there were a lot of voters out there who were kind of straddling the lines, right? They like Donald Trump, but they think, well, maybe his time is past and we can get a Donald Trump in Ron DeSantis without the baggage and that sort of logic that they were bringing to their voting decisions. That got pushed aside because then Ron DeSantis sort of exposed himself as somebody who was more political than in it for the people, which is decidedly where Donald Trump stands. No matter how many indictment darts get thrown his way, he is still making the case successfully, in my opinion, that he is taking the fire for the American people. And I think that's where Ron DeSantis falls a little bit short.
Yeah, you know, I think Cheryl Chumley joining us, opinion editor, host of the Bold and the Blunt podcast for the Washington Times, author of the book, Lock Down the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. I remember that comment, and it was when, and I said it at the time. I said, oh, this was ill-advised when DeSantis referenced the hush money payments to Stormy Daniels. Yes. And he said, I don't have a lot of experience in these things. And he said it in such a way that there was a smirk. And so I think that you're right. That was one of those moments where, you know, if you want to take Donald Trump on with, you know, policy and these kinds of things, then that's probably the better way to go. But then on the other side of the coin, you know, you had Donald Trump that was launching, you know, verbal assault after verbal assault on Ron DeSantis. And so then the question had to become, all right, so when does DeSantis finally get to push back? So I see what you're saying, and I believe that you're right. It's just a very tough dynamic with Donald Trump because, you know, this is a guy who is very tough, who is a bomb thrower, and, you know, he's got to be able to, you know, take those bombs back. But it just didn't seem like that was the right thing for DeSantis to do at the time. Not to mention you had the situation with Twitter and the announcement on Twitter that didn't go so well for the Florida governor. And now I think it's just, you know, what does he do at this point? Because there's no way that he's going to be a VP. You've got other people that I think would be better suited to be a VP. So does DeSantis just, you know, go back, finish his term in Florida, and then wait another 4 years in 2028?
It's a good question you ask, right? And I think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about his smirk, because I think that is kind of what ticked people off, right? And you raise another good question. How can you fight back against Donald Trump and not come off sounding like a petulant, whiny politician or a deep stater or an entrenched political operative or something? And one way to do it is with humor, right? You know, Ronald Reagan perfected that. He could get by with about anything. I mean, and, you know, that's why Ronald Reagan was one of a kind. But with humor, you could fight back against Trump, or you could just do it in a way that sticks with policy and points without attacking the man. And I think Vivek Ramaswamy does pretty well by running his own race, but at the same time, he openly supports Donald Trump. And I think Ron DeSantis, at this point, I'm not so sure that he could do anything to right his campaign ship, but I do not believe that his political career is at an end. I think once Donald Trump is out of the picture, for instance, if he wins the White House in 2024, serves 4 more years, then he's done with politics. That opens the door for Ron DeSantis, but he has to do it in a way that just sticks with policy and is strong and without the arrogance. I think arrogance is a big turnoff.
I think you're right. I think that, the plane flying over the Iowa State Fair, be likable, Ron. I think that was actually very appropriate advice for the Florida governor. And so, when we're sort of wandering down this road of now what's next in the election and, for Donald Trump, he's got a very big decision to make. Who should he choose for, vice president? I mean, clearly it's not going to be a Chris Christie. Clearly it's not going to be a Ron DeSantis. I don't know about a Nikki Haley, but do you have any thoughts on who that person might be? Because it's, with the Donald Trump, that's very important.
Yeah, I don't have any inside info on who that might be, but I can tell you who I would like to see is Kari Lake.
Yes.
It's a go big or go home type of White House that we need next in 2024. And Donald Trump has already had 4 years to make mistakes with his appointments or, kind of bring people forward that didn't maybe do the best job for him in the administration. It's time now to just hit the ground running with people surrounding him who are as openly, unabashedly, unashamedly pro-America, America first as he is. And I think Kari Lake would make an excellent vice president.
I think, gosh, you bring up such a great point because I think about Mike Pence, and with all due respect to the former vice president, a little mealy-mouthed, and, I think that I heard somebody, and I can't remember where I heard this from, but somebody used the term, and maybe it's a term that people are using, but muscular conservatism, where it's like, you know what? We're not going to sit around and take this BS anymore, the woke crap and the attacking of Donald Trump and all these. It's like we need somebody who is aggressive, and we need to treat the media the way that they treat us and meet them head on. And I think that Kari Lake is one of those people, and it feels like conservatism seems to be changing in the sense that we are looking to fight back against all of this wokeism.
We have to, right? Because for too long we've been a little bit polite because we want to believe the best about people. We have a hard time seeing that Democrats, say, are crumbling America with purpose, with intent, because they hate America. But honestly, that is where the Democrat Party is nowadays. This isn't the Democrat Party of JFK. It isn't even the Democrat Party of Bill Clinton days, right? Since Barack Obama came onto the scene and took over the White House, the Democrat Party has taken a radical shift to the left. And with the media in their camp doing their covering for them, they've been allowed to get by with open, blatant lies and deceits and not have to be held accountable to it. So we need someone on our side that just says, I don't care what the left says, I don't care what the media says, this is the agenda I'm pushing forward, let the left howl, but this is the right thing to do.
Well, it's interesting, too, when President Trump, when he was elected, I think that there were certain things that he did to appease the Republican Party. And I think that Mike Pence was certainly one of them when he was looking for a VP, for a running mate. I think Mike Pence was one of those things that he did to appease the right. I'm sure that there were other appointments as well and other decisions that were made. If he continues down this road and, he's not sidetracked or derailed by all of these various indictments, this is going to be all on Trump in the sense that he is going to be the one now making these decisions unencumbered by, a Republican Party that he has to kind of drag along. And I think that for the president, this is going to be his opportunity if he indeed does ultimately win the primary. I believe that he will. But this is going to be his opportunity to build his own team and not to have to make anyone happy other than himself, his advisors, and the people that voted for him. He's not going to have to make any any decisions that the Republican Party wants him to make like he had to do last time.
Right. I think the era of Trump trying to appease or work with anybody is probably at an end, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But really what's going to happen is the left is only going to dig in and fight harder, right? More corruption, more accusations, more allegations, and it will be never ending for another 4 years of Donald Trump, too, which means that it's incumbent on the American people to do our own fighting in our own way. And this is the problem with America. This is why we are at where we're at right now, so divisive. It's because those who know better in America about the idea and the notion of God-given individual liberties have been quiet too long. And we've looked at the politicians to come and save us. Well, parents, for crying out loud, won a huge fight in the last elections without having any political wins on their side. And so we've seen that individuals can make a great difference by taking a great, strong stand. And that's what we need to continue to do. If Donald Trump wins in 2024, which I do hope he does, we all need to keep going with our own individual fights, however we can, to stand strong for American principles.
We'll leave it there. Great conversation. Cheryl Chumley joining us, opinion editor and host of the Bold and the Blunt podcast for the Washington Times, author of the book Lockdown, the Socialist Plan to Take Away Your Freedom. Appreciate you joining us here on News Talk 105.9 FM, WMAL. It is 522. Dan Mandis in for Vince Coglianese, News Talk 105.9 WMAL. I've been looking forward to doing this next topic all day long. Should the Redskins come back to Washington, D.C.? There is a Native American group, and they are demanding, feels like a demand, that they would like to see the Redskins reacquire the name, the Washington, D.C. football team. They would like them to reacquire the name the Redskins. I love that, and Larry had a great interview this morning here on WMAL. I'm going to play some of the audio from that interview and give you all the details straight ahead on 105.9 FM WMAL. Dan Mandis in for Vince Coglianese, News Talk 105.9 WMAL. By the way, I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. You can follow me on the socials at Dan Mandis Show. I've kind of given up on social media, but if you want to follow me, knock yourself out. Could the Redskins name come back to Washington? Could the Commanders go back to the name Redskins? I love this story. Now, I will tell you, and I was speaking with Cheryl Chumley in the last segment, and we were talking about sort of muscular conservatism. Now, I don't know anything about the Redskins. I don't know anything about their new owners. I'm going to be honest with you, folks. I don't really know all that much about football. But what I do know is woke. And what I do know is the bullying that happens when these woke organizations go after companies and, sports teams like the former Redskins or the Cleveland Indians. And so a few years ago, as you folks no doubt know, what happened? The Redskins, a team with a long and storied history, were forced to change their name ultimately to the Commanders, because there were a minority of folks that felt like the name was offensive to Native Americans. Now, part of what I used to get so frustrated about was that these same writers who would just attack the NFL, attack Daniel Snyder, attack the Washington Redskins. Oh, how could you have this racist logo and this racist team? And I'm sitting there thinking, do you people who are writing about how horrified you are at the name Redskins, do you have any idea, actually, the plight of Native Americans today? Do you have any idea, or are you just hiding behind your keyboard and you're trying to show the world how enlightened you are by talking about this racist logo when in reality the plight of Native Americans in this country is incredibly sad? And so now what's happening is you have a new group that have entered the conversation. I love this. They want this group wants the Commanders to go back to the name Redskins. And so Eunice Davidson says the Commanders, they were on with, a couple of folks were on with Larry O'Connor earlier today on the morning show. And Larry was asking him about why it is that they want to have this new conversation. And why is it that they are now demanding that the Commanders go back to the name Redskins? And I like what Eunice Davidson had to say because she's making a lot of sense.
We wrote a letter to the Commanders asking them, that all we really want to do is just have a seat at the table to talk to them about this. That it was taken away by, a lot of the polls out there say that we have 90% American Indians who want this kept, and we know that for a fact because they mail us all the time, email us, messenger us, and they're from all over the nation. So anyway, we decided to go ahead and send an email or a letter to them asking them just for a seat at the table so we can let them know who we are and that we support bringing back the Redskin name. The Redskin name was never, ever a derogatory name, never. Our ancestors used to call themselves Redskin, Red Men. It was just a term to determine their color. They called the white men, they called them white skins. And the black men, they called them black skins. It was never, ever a derogatory term. It never meant bloody scalps the way it's been put out there.
No, of course not. And the vast, vast majority, and you folks know this, you saw the polling at the time. Vast majority of football fans and the vast majority of sports fans, the vast majority of Redskins fans, they had a connection with the Redskins and that iconic logo. And so Eunice Davidson, who is a Native American, I think they said that she's 100%. She's not offended by the old Redskins logo. And I was referencing the interview that I did in the last segment with this Cheryl Chumley. And we're talking about, muscular conservatism. I think part of that has to do with standing up to the woke. And that is exactly what Eunice Davidson and others should be doing, and Eunice is doing that, saying to the Commanders organization and the new owners that we should go back to the name Redskins, and why wouldn't we? If we have learned anything in the past couple of months, it's that conservatives can and will and should fight back against this crap. Just ask Bud Light how they feel these days. And I think when it comes to a Bud Lighting, when it comes to that kind of thing where conservatives are willing and able to fight back, we've learned how to do it. And I'm here to tell you that the very, very loud minority that did force, ultimately, the Redskins to change their name to the Commanders, I'm here to tell you that I think that if it was today, maybe things had gone a little differently. Because the minority may be loud and may have been louder back then. I think these days times have changed. I mean, we all know that the media is relentlessly left. The media doesn't represent the fans. They don't represent the team, and they hardly represent Native Americans, who no doubt, after the previous Redskins owners changed the name, I'm sure that same media that was so concerned about the Native American groups being offended probably just moved along. Meantime, the challenges of those Native American groups does continue. They changed the name. The Redskins are no more. Hallelujah, right? All the problems of the Native American community, they're magically solved. They're gone. It's not the case. The grim reality is that the life expectancy of your average Native American is still some 7.5 years lower than most other groups. They are still horrifically impacted by poverty. They are still horrifically impacted by unemployment and, yes, a lack of health care. So what was the point in changing the name? I would ask all of those do-gooders who are out there hand-wringing about the name Redskins and ask them, congratulations, you got the name changed of a football team. Something, no disrespect intended, but does that really matter? When you've got a group of people, Native Americans, who have a lower lifespan, horrific poverty and unemployment and a lacking of health care. We could talk about alcoholism, anything you want to talk about. We could discuss, the education level. We could talk about the dropout rate. We could speak about the abuse that happens in this community. And I say this not to denigrate the Native American community. I say this because I've been on this topic. I've been talking about this topic for years. And I was horrified and I was offended, not by the Redskins logo, but by all these people who were out there defending the honor of the Native American community while in reality not giving a crap about the Native American community. Virtue signaling by the media, virtue signaling by these activist groups, pure and simple. Now, Larry, this morning on the outstanding interview with these folks from educatenoteradicate.org, he pointed out the polling at the time, and it's true, that the overwhelming majority of fans wanted to keep the name Redskins. So why do the companies, and in this case Dan Snyder back then, why did they give in? Well, because you know that in situations like this, it doesn't matter who's right and wrong. It matters who is the loudest. And a few years ago, it was the activist groups and the media who were the loudest. Well, Tony Henson, who is also from this organization, educatenoteradicate.org, he was on as well with Larry O'Connor on the morning show. And he says, you know what? When it comes to cancel culture, two can play that game.
Well, there's a new sheriff in town now. We're gonna put the heat on him relentlessly. But it's this time, rather than the 10% minority putting the heat on them, it's going to be the 90% majority backed up by the fans. Offense is a two-way street. There's people that say, well, if just one person is offended, then you have to get rid of it. Well, what if just one person is offended by Indian removal? I'm offended. Most Native Americans, most Americans are offended by this cancel culture. I tell you this, Americans, to include Native Americans and any other hyphenated Americans, is sick and tired of cancel culture. And it's only fitting that the original inhabitants of this land are doing the charge to put an end to cancel culture. And that's all that this is.
Yeah, and the sad thing is that the brand, and I'm not telling you folks anything that you don't clearly already know, but the sad thing is that the brands of the Redskins was so well known and so popular and one of America's leading sports brands, as a matter of fact. But remember the reason why they had to change. It wasn't because Dan Snyder, it wasn't because he was horribly offended suddenly by the name Redskins or the logo. No. According to the Washington Post back then, the folks at FedEx threatened to drop the naming rights from the stadium. The NFL had a lot of pressure that they were dealing with as well. You've got advertisers that end up having to deal with a lot of pressure when it comes to these kind of virtue signaling groups. I mean, look what happens. We see this kind of thing all the time. Look what happened at the All-Star game. Was that last year or the year before? I don't even remember anymore. But I think it was the last year when you had the All-Star game in Atlanta. Remember that whole thing? And then, that was last year. Not this year, but last year. And you had, all of these activists out there saying, oh, the state of Georgia, they're changing the voting rules and they're trying to suppress the vote. And, it's Jim Crow 2.0. And everybody who looked at that knew that it wasn't Jim Crow 2.0. They had the election and the election was fine. But what did they do? They had record African-American turnout. But what did the activists do? They forced Major League Baseball to move the game out of Atlanta, cost the city of Atlanta and all those black residents and all those black businesses $100 million. Because that's what the enlightened, virtue-signaling, woke activists do. They scream and they yell and they stamp their feet and they threaten until they get their way. And I said at the time, I felt sorry for Dan Snyder. I felt sorry for the people there within the Redskins / Commanders organization because they were in an absolute no-win situation. They had these activist groups, the very loud minority coming after them. You had the NFL. I don't know exactly where the NFL stood on that whole thing, but you also had, various advertisers and partners that were threatening to pull out of the relationship with the Redskins as well. And so Snyder was who I obviously don't know him or the relationship with the Redskins. I don't know any of that. And the relationship with the city of Washington, D.C. I don't know any of that. But what I do know is that he was in a no-win situation. Do you anger the fans by placating the activist groups? Or do you tell the activist groups to go pound sand and ultimately your business may or may not survive? That's the conundrum that Dan Snyder had. And so now to the point of Eunice Davidson and Tony Henson, the two folks that were interviewed on the morning show with Larry O'Connor this morning, where they want to demand that the Commanders go back to the name Redskins. You just heard Tony say two can play that game, and they can demand just as loud, if not louder, as all of those folks that were demanding the name change a couple of years ago. The question is, will it make a lot of difference? And will the new managers of the Redskins, the new owners of the Redskins or the Commanders, will they go back to the old name? I don't know. They are perhaps in just as awkward of a position as Dan Snyder was way back when. But they do have a petition. And the petition is called educatenoteradicate.org. That is where you'll find the petition. And if you so choose to go sign it as a Commanders fan, as a Redskins fan, whatever it is that you want to say. I'm on the side of the football team on this one. And if they decide that they want to stay with the name Commanders, because now what they've done is they have invested in this new brand, well then more power to them, and I'll support them in that. The new owners, they came in and it was, if I'm not mistaken, it was the Commanders. So all of that business was behind them. And if they feel like they have invested significantly in the new brand, well then bless their hearts, more power to them, and let them go along their merry way. But there's a lot of people that are signing this petition. They would like to see the name go back to the Redskins. Again, that is educatenoteradicate.org. Really interesting conversation with Larry O'Connor this morning. By the way, if you want to hear that complete interview, you can. It is on the WMAL podcast page. My name is Dan Mandis for Vince Coglianese. Dan Mandis here in for Vince Coglianese, and Joe in Virginia somehow found me on social media, sent me a private message via Facebook at Dan Mandis Show, and appreciated my comments regarding the Redskins. It is his opinion that even though he really does miss the old name, the Redskins, it's still the same team, i.e. the Commanders, but Joe says that he would like to see them go back to the Redskins, and he was asking me also, what was the name of that What was the name of that website? Again, I will repeat it for you. It is educatenoteradicate.org. You can check him out today.